Hi, this is Dr. Eric Fields, a licensed psychologist specializing in gambling addiction. Today, I want to talk about the difference between functional and non-functional people with gambling addiction. Now, the non-functional people with gambling addiction are going to be spotted pretty quickly at work. Or I would say eventually they're going to be identified and detected by bosses. It's the functional ones, and I use that in quotes because it kind of gives you the connotation that it's not having such a significant impact on their life, but it is. The reason why we use this term functional, it usually has to do with their functional level regarding holding on to a job and not getting fired and being in at least a somewhat okay financial situation in the sense that their house is not, about to go into foreclosure, or they're not about to lose their home or their life savings or something of that nature. Of course, that degree would signify that they are non-functional. Okay. The other thing that I want to say about people who are functional as people with gambling addiction is that it doesn't mean they don't have significant debt because of this, and it doesn't mean that they're not struggling financially. It really just means that they are surviving. They're able to pretty much pay their bills. Maybe bills are late, once in a while or every so often, but again, they're not in danger of losing their home or something of that nature. And they are able to do at least a good enough level of job performance so that they don't get fired, right? It always makes me think of the Office Space movie, the quote, I do just enough to not get fired, right? So that's basically how these people are operating. They are doing just enough to not get fired. And so, as I've stated before, individuals that work for various organizations are costing these organizations a lot of money because they are not working optimally. They are not contributing at a level that they should or could be. Okay. The other distinction that I want to make between functional and non-functional people with gambling addiction is people who are functional fly under the radar because it doesn't have such a significant impact on their work to a point where it can at least be detected, right? So, like, it does have a significant impact on their actual performance, but not to the degree where it can be detected. So, I really want to make that distinction. And, these people are really just surviving and getting by. Okay. Another distinction, functional people with gambling addiction see opportunity only when it doesn't really go against their values. Okay. So, in other words, they're not going to gamble recklessly if it means that, they might get detected at work, right? They're not going to do the behavior to such a pronounced degree where it might get spotted, right? They're able to do it very covertly. Okay. And a lot of times they are masters at hiding this behavior from loved ones. And you got to think if they can hide this behavior from loved ones, people they live with, their spouses, significant others, they can definitely hide it at the workplace. So they are masters at that. And there are just certain other limits that are tied to their values that they will say, no, I can't do this. For example, Let's say they have a mortgage payment to make and they are like, no, I can't gamble this money. I have to make that mortgage payment. They, a lot of times, are able to do that. Um, and certainly, if they don't have extra money to gamble with, many times they will not. So they're not going to be going to like a loan shark. They're not going to be taking out a loan to do this kind of behavior. They don't typically do those kind of things, right? And so again, it's why they're able to keep it from loved ones such a long period of time and so often and easily keep it from bosses and administration at their job. Non-functional people with gambling addiction, right? They see opportunity everywhere. And of course, opportunity being in quotes because it's really not an opportunity. The opportunities that non-functional people with gambling addiction see, functional people do not see, right? So they have certain lines in the sand that say, like, no, I'm not going to gamble this money and risk losing my home, or no, I'm not going to gamble my son or daughter's college tuition fund, or I'm not going to do it to such a pronounced degree at work where I know I'm going to get caught. Non-functional people with gambling addiction, everything's an opportunity. It doesn't matter when or where they are at their job. It doesn't matter if it's during a meeting. It doesn't matter if the boss is in the room. It doesn't matter if there are a ton of colleagues, very close to them, where it's easy for them to see what they're doing. They don't care. They don't care that there's a high likelihood that their wife is going to walk into the room and see them. Any time that they can do this behavior, right? Physically do this behavior, like anytime they have the phone on them or they're near a computer and they're able to access these sports betting sites or what have you, they're going to do it. And that's why they get caught. And that's why we call them non-functional, because these are the people whose homes do go into foreclosure. These are the people who do lose their job. And these are the people that sometimes, quite honestly, become homeless or have such dire living situations because of this behavior, right? A lot of times, functional people with gambling addiction will go to support groups like GA, and immediately they'll conclude, I don't relate to anybody in here. Like, these people are talking about such extreme consequences that I've never even come close to experiencing. And there is a difference. Contrary to what GA says, we can't lump all people with gambling addiction into one nice little category. It doesn't work that way. You can't make such generalizations about them and say, like, all people with gambling addiction do this, think this, say this. It's not true. It's not been my experience at all. It's a very individualized disorder. But I can tell you that there is this kind of dichotomy that does exist, which there is this group of people who tend to be functional and this group of people who are not functional, right? And of course, this is a pretty arbitrary dichotomy. Of course, there are shades of gray, right? There are people that are like barely functional, but they're really skirting the line and could really mess up their life quite easily on any given week. Sure, right? There are definitely shades of gray. But what I'm talking about today is the group of people who are clearly functional, who have clearly been holding down their job, paying their bills. They have a pretty decent credit score, or at least it's not in the toilet, right? And yeah, like maybe they have like a ton of debt, and it's sucks, right? I mean, if you're in debt like $100,000, I mean, that's awful, right? But if you're making $200,000 a year, you're still able to get by, right? And so a lot of times in the finance industry, yeah, these people have this amount of debt hanging over their heads, and they are not performing optimally at work at all, but they are surviving, right? So, are people who are functional with gambling addiction thriving? Absolutely not. No. And that's my whole point, that this is costing especially the finance industry, so much money because of underperformance when it comes from so many of their employees just not performing at the level that they really should be. But again, not standing out so much. And, the bigger the organization, this is another thing to keep in mind, right? The bigger the organization, the easier it is to fly under the radar, right? So, what you might be able to get away with at JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, you wouldn't be able to get away with as much in a much smaller investment bank or financial institution. So that's really important to keep in mind. So to sum up, there is definitely a difference between people who are functional and people who are not functional when it comes to gambling addiction. And people who are functional being able to set certain limits and fly under the radar and really keep this a secret and not get caught. And these are the people that I'm talking about that are costing institutions and organizations a lot of money because they're not getting caught. A lot of times, management will say, if we had a lot of people with gambling addiction, we would know it. It would be obvious. They would get spotted and detected. And what I'm saying is that's not the case. Think of how many people have an alcohol issue that bosses never know about. Why? Same thing. They're functional in the sense that they're not going to come to work drunk, and they're masters of disguising a hangover. And so it's the same kind of concept. This is Dr. Fields, and I will have more to say about this at another time. Take care.